Hey guys, this is What If Deku Was a Viltrumite Part 1. Let's dive right into it. We start our story off with Izuku Midoriya, and him being told as a child about his father. Inko would have told Izuku this a few weeks after, him being told he was quirkless. But her wanting to raise his spirits, seeing how sad he was, and hoping to keep this a secret from him and tell him eventually when he started to develop some sort of ability. But I wanted to tell him now, since more than ever, it's most likely sure that he'll be like his father. As Inko would have told him on a balcony in their house, telling him that he's not human. Not like how she is. Deku being confused, saying, "What do you mean, Mom?" Well, Izuku, your father... How do I put this? Her trying to explain and saying that your father's from the stars. Me and your father found each other and fell in love. And me and your father are still very much in love. But to put it in more simple terms that you can understand, as she starts to explain that Izuku's father isn't human, and he's far, far away from here, being a part of a different species called Viltrumites. Viltrumites being stronger, faster, and pretty much more powerful than any human here. Being told about the abilities that he'll possess and he'll pretty much be able to have when he grows older, and eventually, one day, he will have superhuman strength, or not even superhuman, just super strength, super speed, flight, super durability, and pretty much an enhanced lifespan. But not going too deep into the details of how long he'll live, but just saying that he'll live longer than the average human. Deku not really knowing what that means yet, but Deku really just being excited that one day he'll be able to become a hero, just like All Might. So Deku will be ecstatic, not really asking too many questions, but saying that when will we be able to meet Daddy? As well, Inko says that one day he will. Now, the whole backstory behind this is, a specific type of Viltrumite would have came to Earth a long time ago, but not under the pretexts of taking over Earth, but under the pretexts of doing his own thing and stumbling across the planet after he was in a very gruesome battle with some sort of galactic Mufasa. So, to put it simple, Conquest would have been Deku's father. Conquest would have came to Earth many years ago, around, let's just say Inko being around 23 to 24, as, she would have found him in Rodeo Beach, bloody and covered up. She would have took him back home, nursing him back to health, as they would have, kind of had a love story, more or less. More of a Debbie and Nolan type of relationship, as they would have fell in love. Conquest being called back to the Empire, and him still being loyal to the Empire, but him finding a new love. And to be simple, Conquest is so lonely. Every Viltrumite is either scared of him or doesn't want to be his friend. They all cower next to him. He hasn't been able to have a actual conversation with a Viltrumite without them being terrified of him. And the first time in decades he's been able to actually have a conversation, feel loved, feel wanted, was from Inko Midoriya. And a few years would have gone by as, Conquest would have spent around 10 or something years with Inko. Inko and him getting married, and eventually Deku being born. As when she was pregnant with Izuku, Conquest was told to come back to the Empire for an important meeting and an important takeover. His services being needed more than ever. Conquest being called away from Earth and having to leave Inko. And telling Inko that once the time's right, to tell Izuku who he is and what he is. Now, the whole thing behind the Empire and taking over the world, Conquest wouldn't have told her all that, but she would have been told that he is an alien, he is from the stars, and what species he is, how he's a Viltrumite, how they live pretty much for a long ass time, and how they're incredibly stronger, faster, more durable, and just more powerful than most humans, or any humans really, considering that he was on Earth for a few years, and he did fight a few villains, considering that some of the villains were collateral damage and pretty close towards Inko's house. In this universe, Inko would actually be a very successful businesswoman, giving Deku a very lavish lifestyle from a young age, considering that she wanted him to have everything she couldn't have when she was a kid. So Izuku's life would be a little different, but more or less Deku's still being sent to, well, public school alongside Kacchan, because Inko was raised in public school, and more or less it made her tough. It made her who she is today, and made her how she is. And she thinks making Deku go to a private school to make him be soft. Same thing, well, Conquest would have suggested before Deku was born, to send him to a public school like how she was. So that's how Deku would still have that whole rivalry and bullying situation with Kacchan. Now, enough of Conquest's story. To put it simple, to put it short, we will see Conquest later down the line, but to put it simple, Conquest is Deku's father, and Deku is a half Viltrumite, being the kin to one of the oldest Viltrumites, Conquest. So yeah, that's basically the pretext of the story, and I hope you guys are staying in tune, because we're about to dive deeper and deeper and deeper, pause, into the story. So we get a time skip a few years after Deku would have been told about his father, and about one day he will gain abilities far beyond his wildest dreams. And before that day, well, Deku will eventually see his father again, but not anytime soon. Deku starting to go to school and proceeding to get bullied over the years and over the course of a couple school grades, considering that Deku is pretty much diagnosed quirkless and is pretty much found out to be quirkless by Kacchan. Kacchan would start to bully Izuku, and over the years, Deku starting to resent him, but more or less trying to still be his friend. Deku still having that personality he would have had in canon, still being Izuku Midoriya. As, if you saw the thumbnail, I'm going to go into detail. Deku is still the same in terms of his personality and how he thinks and how his body is, and all the other physical traits. The only physical trait that's different around Deku is that he has white hair. You're probably wondering, Viltrumites have black hair. Wouldn't he have black hair if he was half Viltrumite like how Mark and Oliver are? Well, you can suck my booty. You can kiss my ass, because I don't care. I wanted Deku with white hair, and I got it. So let's just continue. I don't do that, guys. I'm just playing. But I really wanted this what if where Deku had white hair and it looked a little similar to Conquest, considering that we never saw Conquest with his normal black hair, considering that he's incredibly old. So yeah. So Deku would have white hair on account that, well, if you look at the My Hero universe, genetics don't make sense. Like, we got people with pink hair and pink skin. Considering probably the pink skin is a part of Mina's power set and quirk, it's never explicitly said that her hair is her quirk too. And same thing with Denki. Denki has blonde, actually no matter of fact, blonde hair is normal. Blonde hair is normal. I'm actually tweaking it. What else? Deku. Obviously Deku is a good example. His hair has nothing to do with his quirk. Literally nothing. It's just genetics. So yeah, like, Deku doesn't have a quirk at all, but he has green hair, which is a very abnormal hair color at that, and that's natural hair too. So yeah, so what would happen is, yeah, Deku just have white hair. Maybe someone on Inko's family would have had white hair at one point, being a recessive trait. Deku would have got it. So that's explanation why Deku has white hair, I guess, if you want to get more in detail with it. So we see that Izuku starts to grow up as he gets bullied. And one day, Izuku would have been walking back home, as it would be right after being bullied by Kacchan yet again. Deku would have been walking home, and he would have been really pissed off by this. And over the years, he would have started to kind of falter, thinking his mother was lying to him all these years, because nothing would happen. He wouldn't start to fly. He didn't have any superpower. He was powerless, and he started to feel that way more than ever. He felt like a failure, and sometimes he even considered killing himself the same way Kacchan considered, or pretty much told him to do, saying maybe in his next life he would have a quirk. So Deku sits there near a bench area at the same playground he would have been at, where Kacchan would have beaten him up and bullied him when they were kids. Deku would have looked at his hands, considering what Kacchan said earlier, and it's about to make his way to the school to jump off a nearby ledge and end it all, but being stopped when Kacchan finds him. Kacchan saying, "Isn't this a doozy? I found you twice in the same day, and I just got done beating your ass. You wanna go another round, kid?" As he throws the explosion towards Deku, knocking him off his rocker, as Deku falls on his butt and looks up on Kacchan. Kacchan telling him that you really think you can be a hero. What makes me so pissed off by that is that you really do think you can. As Deku looks at him saying, I know I can. I still have a chance. As Kacchan would say, what does that even mean? You're quirkless. You can't become a hero. You're gonna die, or you're either just gonna waste your time doing something the impossible. You can't become a hero because you're worthless, Deku. And even if you did have a quirk, you're just a worthless Deku. As Deku would have gotten up saying, I'm not worthless. Leave me alone, Kacchan. As Deku would have started to be laughed at by his lackeys, as Bakugo would have gone about how now you're standing up for yourself? Wow. Last time you did that, I beat your ass down to a ground right here in this very playground. Maybe we should recreate some good memories, huh? As he throws the explosion towards Deku, knocking him into a nearby bench, breaking the bench and Deku falling down to the ground. As he started to gang up on him, as Bakugo started to pretty much grind his shoe into Deku's foot, or Deku's face, more accurately, Deku's face, as he would have started to tell him that he's worthless and he's nothing. He'll never be a hero and he'll never have a quirk. You keep on saying you have a chance, but you're worthless. You're quirkless. You're nothing. You should die. Your life has zero purpose. You should just go away and let someone else breathe up that little bit of ozone layer you've been breathing up and wasting space with. As Suzuki would have gotten pissed off as adrenaline started to pump through his veins. Deku's eyes and pupils starting to dilate, as Deku's muscle fibers would start to tense, and his heart starting to beat faster and faster and faster, as Deku's body would go through a change. One of the lackeys would have about to kick Deku in the gut, but Deku grabbing his foot and accidentally snapping it, literally snapping it, same way how Langstrom snapped Debbie's arm in season 2. I mean, literally had the bone cracking out. As the lackey would have screamed out in pain, as the other guy would have been shocked, saying, what the fuck? Kacchan, you said he was quirkless! As Baku would be shocked as well, saying no other person or normal human could break somebody's leg like that with just a flick of a wrist. Deku would have gotten up, looking at his hand, smirking, as he would have had a flashback back to that talk he had with his mother, as he would have said, I guess she wasn't lying, as Deku would have looked up, saying that you messed with the wrong person on the wrong day. As his other lackey would have ran instantly, as Baku would have told him that just because you're quirkless, how is this happening? As he starts to not throw up, but basically trip over his own words, being shocked at what he just witnessed. But him saying it must have been a dud, or something like his lackey didn't drink enough milk or some bull. Him trying to convince himself that Deku was still quirkless, trying to throw the explosion towards Deku, as Deku would have dodged it, somehow realizing that everything around him, if he moved fast enough, moved slow, like it was in slow motion. Everything around him felt slower, like his reaction time was sped up tenfold. As Deku would have grabbed Bakugo's arm, chucking him into a nearby wall, into the playground, knocking Bakugo through it, and having Bakugo laid out, just knocked out cold. Deku would be smiling and would have been just ecstatic. Him saying he's finally able to become a hero, he has his power, and his mom wasn't lying to him all these years. He's as he gets skipped to a couple days later. Now, after the whole incident, no one really knew it was Deku, on top of the lackeys not wanting to snitch, on top of Baku not wanting to say that he got his ass whooped by Deku, the laughingstock of the school. So, okay, simple. Deku would have been training under the guidance of some YouTube tutorials about how people actually did do, literally YouTube tutorials where people talk about how to activate a quirk and how to train a quirk. It's actual YouTube videos about that in this universe. So Deku just looked that up, having no real guidance around his powers, considering that he has no Viltrumite in his life right now. So Deku starts to train and get ready. As through these couple days, eventually the third day, Deku is found out to have his quirk activate, or his Viltrumite powers active now, as Debbie tells him that, well, I'm kind of disappointed you didn't come to me immediately, but I still am happy you told me eventually. As she hands him a book, actually, that was written by his father. Deku's saying, oh, what? That he made instructions for me? As she would have looked through the notebook, it having a very prestigious look to it. As he would have opened it up, as it would have been a digital one, having holograms and actual, instructions to how to activate his power. As it would have been kind of an AI instruction panel to his powers and Viltrumite strength and how to manage it and how to control it. Deku trying to do it on his own, as most of the time he wouldn't be getting anywhere, as he would just be flying into some rubble or falling into sand because he was training at Big U Beach, or just punching holes through walls, as he would get a good gauge on his strength and his speed, but more or less the whole flying part being really hard on him, as he would mainly just fall off buildings, as he would just proceed to fall on the ground and stopping midway for a split second, but still falling down, as his flying would start to kind of come in later. Now, Deku would be told that this instruction manual wasn't completely finished by his father, but everything around flying and strength gauge would be in there. As Deku would say, "Thank you, Mom," and also apologizing that he didn't tell her earlier. He was just so excited, and he wanted to test out his strength and make sure that he had his powers before he actually came to his mother. Now, his mother would have told him to be safe and to be okay, and to, well, I guess we can celebrate. As they would have gone out to dinner, and a couple days would have passed after that. Eventually, the same day that we would see Deku get bullied on by Bakugo, have his notebook torched, and have the sludge villain attack him, that day would eventually come. Now, we see how Izuku walks into class, as the class becomes silent, or not silent, but it stays silent, as Bakugo is especially silent towards Deku today. Now, we see that the teacher walks into class and still says the same stuff like per usual, saying that I know you all want to be heroes, yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. So, Izuku, looking at this, is smirking and is really happy because, well, he has a chance to become a hero, and a good one at that, considering that he's told that he's very strong and that he has infinite potential. As Deku looks over, as you see that Kachan or Bakugo stares back at him after the teacher would have said something about how there are 2 students in the classroom that are considering or are enrolling in UA, Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya. Deku looks over as the classroom looks back at him and back at Kachan, as they hear and they feel the tension, like they feel it, like it's thick as butter. But the classroom just continues to be silent as Bakugo doesn't lash out at Deku, as he pretty much doesn't want to get humiliated, considering that he got absolutely side blitzed by Deku, as Deku just activated his power too at that. So Deku's had his powers for about, like, I think a week now, or like a week and a half now, so like 7 days, 8 days. So he's had his powers for around like 9 to 10 days now. So we see after that the classroom would have been emptied out. Bakugo would have stepped by Deku, pretty much trying to interrogate him, saying that you lie all this time about being quirkless. As Deku would have told him a lie, he was actually kind of cocking up himself, saying that he just got his powers activated, or his quirk just manifested that day when you guys were bullying me. So thank you for jumpstarting what I needed. As he would have chuckled and laughed, as he would have said to see you guys later, as he would have walked away awkwardly. As Bakugo was about to stop him, but his lackey telling him to chill, as last time it didn't go so well. As the other lackey would have been in a cast, as his leg would have been kind of, stitched together, like, grafted back kind of in place, as they were lucky that his leg didn't, get absolutely ripped off entirely, as only a piece of a couple ligaments were actually intact, and the doctor said he probably would be having to do, snip, like walking around with the stump his whole life if it wasn't for the ligaments that were left over. So we see that Izuku walks off and is walking down back home, as he looks at his notebook, trying to go through more and more pages, but more or less the pages are empty after just giving him a few tips on how flying works, and pretty much about how strength gauging also works, how you should try to do something like a love tap, but not too hard, because you can end up breaking somebody's entire head clean off their body, or not too soft, or else you'll feel like a love tap or a smack. So he has to know exactly how much he's gauging and how much strength he should put into a punch, a kick, or anything along those lines. As Deku would be rushed by the sludge villain last second, as the sludge villain would just rush him instantly, not really trying to talk or anything like that, as Deku would start to get overwhelmed and starting to get stuffed by the sludge villain. Pause! As Deku would be starting to get overwhelmed, but him fighting back and starting to just try to use his strength, but none of it really happening, as Deku would just try to do something different, as his body would start to go into fight or flight, and flight being, flight. As Deku would start to torpedo himself up past the whole area they were under a bridge, Deku would fly through the bridge straight up into the atmosphere, as Deku would be completely and utterly shocked at how fast he moved in those split seconds. And doing this, we see that the sludge villain would have let go a few minutes ago, as he would have started to fall back down to the ground. As Deku would start to fly around, trying to use his strength and his speed to his advantage. Him enjoying and just seeing the world for the first time ever in the view of a spaceship, him seeing the world, the planet, as beautiful as it is, him bumping into a nearby satellite but gently putting it back in place as he would have flew back down to Earth, as he would have had a very rough landing, but more or less him being super ecstatic that he now has activated his flight. Now, Deku would be walking back home, about to go on another flying, about to go into a nearby alleyway and fly off, not trying to be seen by anybody since quirk usage outside of having a license was kind of prohibited. Fly off, but would have heard a huge commotion. Him running over there and would have seen Katsuki trying to fight back after the sludge villain would have still tried to overcome and pretty much take him. Now, he was about to jump in, but eventually All Might would have shown up, using his quirk last minute, or using his power last minute, saving Bakugo. Now, in this continuity, since Deku didn't jump in, well, All Might would have not seen him, or pretty much said something like, oh, he should be a candidate for, all for one or one for all. Or one for all, yeah, one for all. So Deku wouldn't be a candidate, and All Might would basically not see him on his radar until later down in the series. So you saw Deku just walks off, as he would have continued to fly back home. Him landing pretty narrowly on top of his building, as he would have actually been living in a very different neighborhood. Like I said earlier, Deku's mother would be pretty well off. Them living in a similar neighborhood, about a couple blocks, or not a couple blocks, but a few roads away from Momo Yaoyorozu and Todoroki's neighborhood. Or not neighborhood, but like same area. They would be in the same neighborhood. So Deku and Todoroki and Deku and Todoroki and Momo would live in the same neighborhood, being pretty, in a rich neighborhood, pretty bougie neighborhood, but Deku having a pretty normal life when it came to his schoolwork and stuff like that, because he wanted him to grow up hard, and Deku did grow up a little bit hard. He grew up being bullied, and more or less now he knows how it feels to be bullied, and he's a little bit more compassionate. But to be real, that power gonna come to Deku's head pretty quickly. I mean, come on now, if you're bullied your whole life and then you got powers like a freaking Viltrumite, I'm pretty sure I would start to tweak out too. But it ain't gonna corrupt him too much, But Deku is the son of conquest, so he's gonna have some conquest tendencies later down the line. But we'll get into that. We'll get more into that like in season 2 or like part 2. So what happened is we see how Izuku would have started to get ready, and for the 10 months next coming up, for the next 10 months, Deku would start to train and perfect his flying. Now he would have started to look at the manual, as the manual would basically be useless to him after a few minutes or a few couple months, as a manual would run out of space, as Deku would just throw it in the back of his room, as he would have started to just learn it on his own time, trying to wing it. Now Deku would figure out flying as it was some sort of muscle internally, and that he had to fight back against his natural tendencies to not to fall, as if he doesn't want to fall, he won't. It's just going to be natural to him. So Deku figures out flying pretty quickly, but he will learn how to go around like speed, like breaking the sound barrier. He will get to that speed eventually, but Deku's around the same speed as season 1 mark in terms of flying. Now Deku is flying around and getting used to that as well, as he does kind of like it, as he does figure out a little bit about how he can make his own leverage, and that he can literally force off nothing, like he can jump off of nothing, just pure air. So Deku's pretty impressed by this. He also figures out that he has to strength gauge, because most of the punches he does do on like dummies or brick walls or anything like that, they are pretty much destroyed when he throws everything he has at them, like a solid punch. Deku does look up some boxing lessons, and does take some boxing lessons in Japan, and also does take some ninjutsu classes as well. Now he does hold back a lot, but he does learn the basic movements and skills and teachings, so he is able to learn how to actually box and use jiu-jitsu. But he's not the best at jiu-jitsu, since he had to hold back a lot, considering that if he did really go all out, he would probably kill all of his instructors. So Deku would know pretty much everything about boxing, at least. Him knowing how to use his hands and kick and swiftly dodge and hit a nice jab, uppercut, rib cage, liver shot, all that good. So he'll be a pretty good boxer, and not being the best at jiu-jitsu, but knowing a few key basic moves. He also would have taken karate classes when he was a kid, so he would have known a lot about some kicking movements. But other than that, Deku would have a pretty solid fighting style, at least. So he would use most of his fighting style and pretty much pair it with flying, using the leverage he can create by himself to propel himself forward and give him that extra kick and speed move that he needs in a fight. So Deku's flying and use of making his own, leverage would have greatly benefited his fighting style, and he would have used that to his advantage the most. as since in continuity, in canon, Deku was a really good quirk user, just doesn't have the best quirk since he was quirkless at first, but he definitely mastered one for all. So what happened after this 10-month arc training, we see that Deku signs up for the entrance exams and gets ready to go wow everybody. Now Deku does still, in canon, actually trip and bumps into Uraraka. They talk a little bit, as the same continuity of the same conversation does play out, considering that Deku's personality hasn't changed too much, but Deku's a little bit more confident in the fact that he is powerful enough to become maybe even the #1 hero. So what happened is Deku does flirt, actually does flirt a little bit unknowingly to Uraraka, as Uraraka kind of flirts back, as they go their separate ways, saying, good luck to each other. Deku aces the written exam, flying colors, he's a top tier echelon student. And after that, we see that Deku bumps into an old childhood friend, Momo Yayurozu, as they talk to each other, as Momo says, it's been years since I saw you, and that after you moved, or after you moved, but after you went to, after high school, we never saw each other anymore. They started to talk and chat it up, but her being stopped or interrupted by one of her butlers telling her that she needs to go to her exam, and she says bye to Deku and basically wishes him luck, saying that I hope I see you in UA, as they walk their separate ways. As Deku and Momo kind of just see each other and wave goodbye as Marcus, so she would have actually had a little bit of a conversation with him, but before her butler pushed her off or took her away like a weirdo, she would have actually asked him why was he here, as she would have been told by Deku that he actually just manifested his quirk and he was a late bloomer. Her being surprised by this, and her saying that I hope I see you in UA, and same thing would happen, her getting pulled off. So happened after that, we would see Izuku go off and start to walk home. What the hell am I talking about? He would start to walk over to the other exam area to get ready for the robot part, the more physical portion of the exam, the more interesting part, what I'm talking about? So he would have been yapping, trying to talk to himself slowly. Ida would have pressed him, saying, yo, chillax, like you're talking way too loud, man, what are you doing? You're interrupting everything, blah, blah, blah. But President Mike would have actually got on Ida, telling him he was being hella loud, because he was berating the student and telling him to shut up and telling him to keep quiet and let him finish what he was saying. So he would have told him about the point and the measuring system, but keeping out the key factor, the hero system. Hero points would have actually been a thing, but him not telling them that. So they would have been told to get ready. Katsuki Bakugo would have saw Deku and would have kind of been pissed off that he was here, but just letting it slide, as eventually all that anger he's been building up will eventually pop out, near part 2. Now what happened after this, we see how Deku gets pumped as they're told to go off, as before that did happen, Ida getting on Deku for mumbling. He would also try to stop Deku for seeing Uraraka, as he would have saw Uraraka as they were getting ready for the entrance exam, but yeah, Ida would have stopped him still. But between Ida trying to press Deku and Deku trying to press back, saying leave me the hell alone, him actually starting to cuss towards Ida because Ida was getting kind of annoyed, or he was getting annoyed by Ida. But eventually they were being interrupted by President Mike saying there are no real countdowns in the real world, go, go, go. Deku hearing this and smirking as he would have blasted off, making a little bit of a sound wave and shockwave, keeping Ida or pushing Ida off his balance, as everybody would have watched this, being shocked at how fast this kid just moved and how seemingly he just jumped off from the sky, or jumped off from the floor into the sky and started propelling himself around. Because flying quirks are pretty rare in the My Hero world, considering that Hawks is a pretty strong flying quirk hero, but there aren't many heroes that can actually fly in the My Hero world. So we see how Deku starts to fly around, torpedoing through robots that they're nothing, and racking up a pretty good score in a matter of 5-6 minutes. Eventually, he would have also saved a few people in the crosshairs, because he would have actually caused a little bit of damage, him kind of getting over his head with his flying, but him starting to come back to reality, because he did realize with him training his powers near Deku Beach, he did cause a lot of rubble, and all the trash he did pick up was absolutely mangled, considering that he torpedoed through it. The punches he did throw off made shockwaves, and he had to really hold back most of the time, because if he didn't, he would end up killing somebody or breaking and causing a lot of collateral damage. And as a hero, you've got to stop collateral damage, because publicly, if you're a hero and you save the day, but you leave the city looking like the Avengers won Chitauri battle, yeah, you're not gonna be a good hero. They're gonna hate you publicly. They're gonna hate you. So we see that Izuku starts to fly around and kind of gauge his speed, trying to slow down and not trying to cause shockwaves and pretty much cause more damage and more damage. He does save about 5 to 6 different people, as eventually he's about to fly off, seeing the zero pointer, but seeing that it was no real use to fighting it, he's about to fly off, but stopping midway when he heard a scream. Help! Help! As he would have heard a screaming girl looking over and seeing a brown-haired girl under some rubble. Looking closer and seeing it was Uraka. He would have flew over there, causing a sound barrier to pop off. Deku being surprised at how fast he just moved and starting to stumble a little bit in the sky, but through that stumbling, he would have been caught off guard, being grab out of Deku, sitting him flying, but Deku grabbing and finding his composure, stopping mid-air and flying back down to the zero pointer, flying under the zero pointer's arms and legs, grabbing Uraka and pushing the rubble off of her in a matter of seconds, grabbing her and flying her to safety. As he would have landed her near a building, saying that, "Are you okay? Are you alright? Are you hurt?" As the zero pointer was about to stomp on them, about to hit the building they were on, being locked onto them for some reason. As Deku would have grabbed Uraka, flying her out of the way, as Uraka would have said that, like, "What's going on? Why is it attacking only us?" As Zuko said, "I don't know." As the zero pointer was about to hit them one last time, but Deku having Uraka in his arms, him not wanting to get her hurt, as he assumed he could probably take damage, but Uraka was normal. And considering that he's a Viltrumite and he knows he's not human, he didn't want to kill her. So, and also Deku never shielded anybody with his body before, especially if it was a full body attack as well, being grabbed by the zero pointer. So Deku would have made a risky move, dropping Uraka and letting the zero pointer hit him. And in the split seconds as Uraka was falling down, Deku would have hit given everything he had into a single punch, mimicking the same style Deku did for, Detroit Smash, and would have obliterated the zero pointers and pushing the zero pointer back with a huge shockwave. Deku being sent back flying by his own attack, but stopping midway in a matter of a few feet, not being that, thrown off by his own attack, but looking back down, seeing Uraka about to hit the ground, as Deku would have flew down there pretty fast, grabbing Uraka before she can fall down to the ground, and saying, "Sorry that I had to drop you, because if I didn't, we probably would have both gotten smushed, and I'm durable, but I'm assuming you aren't." She would have been hyperventilating, saying, "Thank you for saving me, but you scared the shit out of me." As she would have started to chuckle as they would have laughed at each other, but her being told that, "I think my ankle's broken," as Deku would have told her that, "I'm going to take the recovery go, okay? It's the least I can do." As they would have Deku would have hovered her over to recovery girl. Now, they would have said their goodbyes a little bit, as Deku would actually stay near her bedside because he would have had pretty good, counting in his head, assuming that he got a lot of good points from taking on a bunch of robots beforehand, before saving her from the zero pointer. So Izuku just stayed by her side and started to just talk to her, as they would have started to yap it up, but eventually them being stopped midway by, a nearby counselor, or not counselor, but a pretty much watcher, saying that you guys should go home, and the entry exam is over, as they would also be accompanied by recovery girl saying the same thing. Now Deku would have actually offered to walk Uraka home, as she would actually accept. Then walking each other home, as Deku would say to have a good night and saying, "I hope you got into your way," as they would have basically said their separate ways, said their separate goodbyes, as she would kind of find him a little attractive. Deku flying off, as we would see him land back home, as we'll wait for, the entry exams, let's just say stats that come out. A couple days go by as Deku gets a note from UA that he got in, and that he got the highest score in the entry exams. And so I'm gonna leave it up here, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and as always, guys, have a blessed day. And before we go, I want to ask you guys one question: who should be Deku's love interest? Normally, Yorozu, their childhood friends, but should it be Uraka? The innocent brunette. So who should it be? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe, and as always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.